There is no argument that our next guest, Dr. Walt Mayo, is the father of optometric online communication. He's a 1985 graduate of the Illinois College of Optometry, where he was awarded the Lawrence P. Feigenbaum Award for top clinician in his class. Joining Coastal Eye Group that same year, Dr. Mayo served as the president of the South Carolina Optometric Association and was awarded its Outstanding Service Award twice. In 1999, he was named one of the top 10 optometrists of the decade by Optometric Management Magazine. He's served on the editorial board of every major optometric journal out there. He's authored nearly 200 articles as well. Dr. Mayo was named the 2001 Optometrist of the South. He has also been named a South Carolina Optometrist of the Year, and in 2015, he was given the prestigious President's Award by the Southern Council of Optometrists, who specifically cited his more than 20 years of work with the Council, the leading educational organization in the profession, and SECO, as we all know it, we're familiar with. He speaks nationally and internationally, and as you'll learn during our interview, is and has been a prolific innovator for our profession. He is in the top 3 optometrists who influenced me, and very early on when I formed ODs on Facebook, I looked to Walt as a model for optometric online communication, and I still do. So warm welcome, Walt. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Glad my tech worked. You know, people mistake me as a tech guy, but you're the tech guy. I connect people and I market, and I'm good at marketing. But we're with a real technician. You know, I want to start by introducing the viewers to Optcom List and what you brought to the profession through this first communication tool that we used when I was a very young OD. It was the original online resource for optometric questions and concerns, and it predated social media, but it was very social. And you created it, I think, in 1994. Is that right?
Yeah, it actually came about after some other things that were happening. I actually joined in a little bit late behind some people like Dave Davidson, Mark Ryboy, Bert Happel, in the BBS network. It was called OpNet, and that was pretty old technology. And then I experimented with trying to find ODs on AOL, and we created an AOL conference with about 200 ODs, and then that kind of spun off into the listserv, which is known as Opcom List, which still runs today.
That's great, because that kind of outlines now historically exactly what happened and how it came about. You do all this while you do a ton of other stuff. You have your own website development company, drsites.com. You have created the largest library of eye care images, the International Optometric Eye Atlas. You run the Optometry and Technology Facebook group, which I believe has now over 17,000 members, and SECO. So
right.
There are probably many first initiatives that you brought to optometry online and offline via education that I'm missing. So please, whatever I miss, fill them in on it as we go along. But I want to start by having you take us back to a simpler time, a time when people still ask the question, what's the internet? And tell us the story of Opcom List from concept through launch.
Well, sure. Some people may remember things like CompuServe and other things like that. But the Opcom List basically was a mailman-based email list, which Mailman is still a popular listserv piece of software. There are others out there. And eventually, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I switched it over to a Google group. And the people who are on the list, they've just been with me for 20 some years. It's, we kind of all have aged together. We all know each other really well. It's a very personal environment. Growth has slowed tremendously because of things like ODs on Facebook and other forums. But it's still there, and it's still plugging along, and we all consider ourselves pretty close friends. And a lot of them show up at meetings. It's really strange because a lot of my best friends, I look back and I'm like, where did I actually meet that person? And it was through, Opcom List or later on through the more like Facebook and things like that. But definitely, most of my social circle came from that. And it came back from a time when, it was quite a lot different. We've got the Twitter situation where you have very short pieces of text. Back then, when it was OpNet and then later Opcom List, you're talking about people who would write 2,000 and 3,000 words, at a time. It was a very lengthy discourse, and we don't really see that as much today, and I kind of miss that. But again, it's still going on to some extent on Opcom list. A lot of people who kind of aged with me, they've already retired. So it's amazing how many of them who've retired have stuck with the list. They're still there. So it's been something that's gone on, and I'm glad to see it's still around. But certainly my efforts are focused mainly on SECO, and that's where all my major time is put in as far as technology goes. It's a 24 hour a day, 12-month a year endeavor, and like I've told many people since 1994 when I joined SECO, I've always said I have the best job in optometry.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about today, that people who don't sit on our end of the computer really, I'd like them to know, is that, there's a difference between a group and a community. And both of us, both you and me, we've really built communities. As anyone can be part of a group, but to be part of a community, you really need to value the space that you communicate within and demonstrate its value by your conduct within the community. So we're similar that way, because I know as far back as 97, I think you wrote about it, the need for an online code of conduct. There were many suggested rules, and we can't focus on all of them, but two of them that resonated with me specifically were, one of them, you said behave privately and publicly, which meant to me that you should act the same way online that you would face-to-face with someone, because a lot of people act in ways that they never would in person with other people, and that disturbs the peace. Can you comment on that?
Well, absolutely. I think that people feel pretty safe, behind a screen. Like, well, I can say whatever I want and get away with it. But, the fact of the matter is, you can't build a community when people behave like that. And it makes moderating it very, very difficult, because, we're talking about a group of extremely intelligent people. And if you get someone who decides they're just going to they're going to stay right on that line, right on that edge of the fence, where it's like, how much can I get away with? I'm not sure what their motivation is, but they'll kind of push the envelope and say, how much can I push Walt or Alan to, before they get on me? And then if you finally make a decision to get on top of them and say, hey, you got to change your behavior, then, they blow up and say, hey, you're picking on me and you're treating me poorly. But what people don't tend to understand, and I think you'll understand this better than anybody else, is that while that person's walking the fence and they're creating all this grief for you, in the background, you've got members who are just barraging you, saying, why are you putting up with this guy? Why don't you do something about it? And then they get upset with you. And that's all happening behind the scenes. And that makes it very, very difficult to deal with. And I'm sure you, more than anyone else in the history of this profession, has had to deal with that. And that's the least fun part of the job.
Oh, I've got stories, believe me. Yeah, it's funny. Like what if you want to get intellectual about it, what I realized was that if you allow people to communicate in a way that most people don't want to communicate, they will run your group, and they often create, what I saw happening in that other group was that they created a core group of people who liked to engage that way, and they everyone else was afraid to say something because they would get beat up, and they marginalized them. They push them to the side. So the engagement of the group goes down. These groups, your group, whether it's 20 or 200 or 20,000 doctors, these are experts, and they all have different experiences, and they have valuable expert-driven content to add. But if you run the group in a way that, or you don't run it and you marginalize most of them, the sharing goes way down and the value goes down, and then you don't have that great a place.
Well, the second that you create an image of yourself as the moderator, that you're intolerant of people's, ability to express themselves, then you're done for. And so, that just adds another layer of complexities, that you've always got to be viewed as someone who's fair and yet not a pushover. And, it's just like parents who try to be a parent and their kid's best friend at the same time. It's a very difficult line to walk. And I probably tend to be a little bit more of a pushover than I should be at times, but, I will bow up if I have to. And, the thing about it is, if you finally do get to a point where you say, hey, you got to go, then unfortunately those same people tend to pop up other places and give other moderators grief. And that's that's not fun. We all deal with the same group of people.
Right. Or they go somewhere else and they start behaving there because they don't want to get kicked out. They give you the hard time,
That's
then they
all.
behave
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Well,
I've seen it all, man. But this isn't about me. I really want to talk about you. We have, you and me, we have more than a few stories to tell for sure, like the time when this happened or that happened. Can you tell us about a time when you were leading your community out of a difficult situation?
well, I'll go back to a story that just kind of shows how important all this can be if people will take the time to develop real relationships through these groups. Most of us who do that online now, we've kind of resorted to email or text messaging on a one-on-one basis. But it used to be, especially back in the early days of Opcom List or even farther back in the OpNet days, that people developed a real bond as a group. I will never forget that we had one Thanksgiving. This was a long time ago, where one of our most prominent members stopped communicating. We weren't really sure what was going on. And about a week into it, we finally started making some phone calls and found out that he had passed away at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And I remember myself actually, really couldn't hardly talk. I mean, I came to tears, and I don't do that very easily. And when I let the people know that he had passed away, it kind of rolled through our community like a wave. And that's because we had, through these long discussions, 500 words, 1,000 words, going back and forth, we were very close friends, not like today where it's a lot of times more superficial. And that was an entire group. It wasn't a one-on-one relationship. I mean, it was a lot of people who were involved, and that kind of situation showed me, just how powerful this can be if it's treated with respect and it's done properly. And I think that's part of the problem right now is that, those kind of things are easy to manage when it's, 20 people, 100 people, a couple hundred people. When things start getting bigger, it's kind of hard to have that same environment, that same level of trust. And I think that's the hard part right now. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but there's different networking styles, and one type of networking is kind of a star-shaped network where you've got a central server and then things kind of come off in a star shape around that. I actually view ODs on Facebook like that. Is that you're kind of the core group, and then it's allowed people to get to know each other and develop special interest in, and then you've splintered off all these other small niche groups like optometry and technology, different types of specialty groups. And I think that's really cool because I don't think that could exist if we didn't have that central core of ODs on Facebook where people can kind of get the word out, kind of get together and say, hey, we need a group on Ortho K, or we need a group on, well, heck, I just started one a month ago called Optometry, Food, Wine, and Travel, and the thing has exploded. And I give you credit for that because that's where people kind of learned about it. But literally in 1 month, we have added over 1,000 members. So, again, it's no one's an island. We're all kind of in this together, and, your group being so big, it's kind of where people can kind of, it's the genesis of a lot of these other smaller groups where people can get more involved in more detail on certain things.
So my insight's a little different around that. I don't disagree, but I think it's the same, but it happens differently. For instance, in our group, you'll see people say something that influences you, and then you'll notice periodically their name when they post again. You kind of get familiar with them. And then what do you do next? Well, you may friend them on Facebook, and then you're part of their regular Facebook where you get to know each other outside of ODs on Facebook more intimately. And plus, early on too, I wanted the people to get to know each other as well. So we started having our Vision Expo parties where the theme was, press flesh with the people that you're friends with online in real in together. So I think that intimacy is there to a degree. Of course, it's not as closed and close in a smaller environment. It's in a big environment, but then it spreads into like the star, like you said. I love that analogy. It spreads out to the points where they become actual friends on social media. I know it's happened to me 1,000 times. So in that sense, it's the same.
Well, I think that's where things get solidified. And although I think the virtual meetings are great, the in-person meetings are really where these relationships get nailed down, and really, where you get these firm, lifelong friendships. I mean, back when Opcom List was kind of the big dog, we used to have what were called the Opcom bashes at SECO, and they were much smaller than the ODO Facebook parties, but they were significant, and we had a lot of fun with those. And I mean, you've had parties at every major meeting, including SECO. Sometimes you get a group of people, and maybe 20, 30 people who this annually they show up at the same meeting, and it's you're kind of creating their own special destination. We certainly have that with my group of friends at SECO. That, I mean, we plan which restaurants we're going to go to and things like that. And I would encourage people to do that. We're never going to be as close and productive as a profession if we're only virtual or social media. We need to have that face-to-face connection, and so we need to preserve that. And SECO was the last big meeting that went off live, and we're probably going to be the first one that happens again in late April, early May. And I think that for the sake of the profession, the exhibitors, everyone involved, that I hope people come rushing back now that they're vaccinated to the meetings that we have on a local, regional, national, and international basis. So, I hope that happens. I really do. I've kind of dedicated my life towards creating one of those destinations with SECO, and SECO's been around for 100 years. I don't want to see it go away, and I don't think it will. But certainly, we're facing challenges every meeting that we've never had to face before, and hopefully, we'll get it all behind us and kind of go back to some level of normalcy.
I know technology is big in your life, and it sounds like SECO really is taking up most of the time. And Walt, of course, is in practice at Coastal Optometry for more than 30 years now. Did I get the name right?
It's actually Coastal Eye Group. It's a big ophthalmology group that was founded in 1974 in the Georgetown, Myrtle Beach area. And we now have 5 offices, 14 ophthalmologists. We have a subspecialty office. And, I've always, I was the second doctor in the practice, joined them in 1985. And now I'm the longest running actor in the play. There's no one who's been with the practice longer than I have. But again, I only practice 1 day a week. My role is greatly diminished. And, when I wake up in the morning, I'm instantly thinking about SECO and technology, not really patients so much. And I enjoy seeing them, but when I can give that last day, I'll probably celebrate a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, I felt similarly lately as well.
Yeah.
So I know you have a son. Tell us about the rest of your family.
3 kids. I have a beautiful wife who's been with me since she was 18 years old. I can't believe she still puts up with me.
Wow.
I have 3 kids who have really interesting backgrounds. One was a professional ballet dancer, a young man, and he now has a beautiful family. He married one of the dancers that he trained with, and they have 2 little boys.
Wow.
And then my daughter, who's the youngest, she's actually an OD now, and
Congrats.
she's married to one of her classmates from SCO. So it's 2 optometrists in the same family, which is really interesting because everyone thinks she became an optometrist because of me, but I think it was more in spite of me. Then my oldest son, as you mentioned, he works with me in the computer area. And, a lot of times there's things where, when he's not doing web stuff, he's helping me with SECO things that are like, please help me. I can't do all this today. And so he'll help with that kind of stuff. And that's been a big help as well. He also helps moderate some of the Facebook groups, and people don't really recognize that, but he's the one's kind of vetting memberships and things like that. I know you've got some hired hands that do that, but he spends a lot of time doing that as well. So yeah, it's 3 great kids, and my daughter has 2 young daughters of her own, so I've got 4 grandkids now, and life is just very good.
You're on that grandkid track. That's great. I don't I've handed off some of the work moderating and looking for guideline violations, but I still vet every single member that enters the group. It's just too important a job not to be able to hand it off to someone who just doesn't really understand the industry or what people might type when they apply to be in there. I always fear that people will get in the community that are journalists or something that might write an article on what they see in there and paint us as the greedy middleman. So I'm very, very anal and careful about who I let in. And anybody sees the number of people in there, 43,000. If you can imagine that 43,000 times I've vetted every single person, but I enjoy it. I actually enjoy it because it helps me learn who's coming in and who's in there. And, you know, you can run a group much better when you know who's in there. And that kind of, that's
well, and I think anyone who's contemplating running a group needs to think that, you know, they need to be thinking in those terms immediately, because if you let a group grow rapidly and not with a lot of control, then it gets out of hand, and you either have to shut it down, kick a lot of people out, or become totally moderated. And you know, my optometry technology group is very big. It's not yours, you know, as big as yours, but it's probably the third or fourth biggest one out there, and it's fully moderated. I mean, I just have to have complete control over it. Lots of people want to post stuff that's, you know, trying to sell things and such. So, you know, that one is a little bit more difficult to manage. This new one that I've got, you know, the optometry, food, wine, and travel, it's just freewheeling, and so far I haven't had any troublemakers, but it's really just extremely busy, and it's just been a lot of fun. And we talk about optometry, none at all. So yeah, it's a bit of a diversion.
Well, that's great. You know, I want to start wrapping it up now, but I want to tell everybody to be sure to join Optometry, Food, Wine, and what was it? Food, Wine, and Travel?
Food, wine, and travel.
Mm-hmm. And I'll definitely be checking that out too. I think I already belong to it. And then also, please, what is Seco's website?
Sure. Well, we have 3 websites. We have secointernational.com, which is just kind of a website where you can learn about the history and the structure of the association. We have Seco University, which is our education portal, which again has audio archives, has COPE-approved CE, lots of it. And it's also where we handle all the registration and VOA for our webinars, which we've got webinars coming up. Again, we had 40 some events before the end of the year. We took a short break. We're revving up again big time next week. I think it's next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. We've got a webinar that's not COPE approved, but it's CE broker approved for Florida, South Carolina, and other states that don't require COPE approval. We have a relationship now with the NAO, the National Academy of Opticianry. We were doing webinars for those, which everyone's welcome to send their staff to those. So, I mean, if you have people working in optical or contacts, send them. And most of these events are free. And then we have attendseco.com, which is dedicated solely towards our Congress. And right now you can go there and sign up to be alerted when registration opens, and the website itself is open in full. Right now it's just a splash page, but we are doing the final testing, and that should be going live in the next few days. I mean, very shortly, and registration's been pretty much vetted. So registration and the site's going to go live very, very soon. We're excited about that.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited about seeing you in person again in April. I will be there, and I encourage everyone to come join me. We'll figure out some way to do something socially. I don't know if we're going to have one of those big ODs on Facebook parties, but maybe a more intimate type of get to see each other again thing. And again, I want to thank you for everything of value you've brought to the profession, for everything of value you've brought into my life, and for being a friend and being there when I've needed you in the past. So you're awesome, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and your experience today, Walt. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. It's been a lot of fun, and any other time you need to fill some airspace, you just let me know.
This is more than filling airspace, but I would love to have you back. So again, thanks a lot, and
thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Welcome to Fluorescene,